All right, so I want to explain to you guys how this stuff here results in the traits that we see. So if you guys remember this sequence here that we're looking at, that is the DNA. Yeah, you should write down what I'm writing down so that way you guys know what we are talking about. The DNA. In fact, I'm going to start at the two opposite ends of the story, and then we'll go from the beginning to the end. All right? So, all right, so I want to go to the end of the story first, and then I'll walk us through back from the beginning, because I want you guys to see what the big picture final story is. So when we think about our traits are all the results of something called proteins. So these proteins are what's causing our traits that we see. Sometimes when we're referring to traits, we will call them phenotypes. So phenotypes, the way I think about that is physical trait phenotypes. Trying to make sure that you guys can see it all right. So these are caused from proteins. Proteins are molecules with very specific shapes, and their real specific shapes allow it to do functions. So for example, with eye color, my eye color is brown because it's making a protein, and that protein results in that brown color. If someone has blue eyes, they make a different protein, and that results in the blue color. Same thing with our hair as well, because our hair has different proteins in there, and depending on the shape of that protein, it could influence if the hair becomes straight or if the hair becomes curly. Are you okay with that so far? Yeah. So that's what the protein is. Now, in order to understand what protein is, we need to think, how do we build proteins? How do we make proteins? And the way our body makes proteins is by using the DNA code. So what happens is, if you remember that we have this DNA code, and there were how many bases?
25.
4. A, T, G, and C, right? A, G, T, and C, and that's the sequence. When we read this, we read it in a group of 3. So we go 3, and then that tells me what amino acid to grab. And then the next one, CAT. Cat. And then GGG. So do you see how we're reading it as a set of 3? Now this set of 3 tells us to grab an amino acid. So there's lots of different types of amino acids, and about 20 amino acids that I think our body uses from memory. So amino acids All right, so amino acids, the way I like to think about them is they're like beads, and all these beads are different. Then what I do is I string these beads together in a really specific order, and that is what makes the peptide. So I like to think about this as like a bracelet or a necklace, or we can just say it's a string of beads, the way I like to remember that one. Then what happens is that string of beads will fold, and when it folds, it makes that protein. And like I said, that protein has a really specific shape, allowing for a very specific function. It's really important that these amino acids get in the right sequence. So the way that my body knows when it comes to putting it in the right sequence is the DNA. So if I read the DNA and I have TGA, and I look on the list for TGA, which is a little bit hard because this is a harder list. TGA, where are you? At the bottom?
Bottom right.
Bottom right. There it is. So that tells me stop. So that tells me there's an N there. If I go and look for CAT, let's find cat. There it is. It tells me to grab histidine in that sequence. And then it wants me to grab GGG. So if I look for GGG, it tells me to grab glycine. So do you see how that tells you what sequence of amino acids to put together? And that's what our DNA tells us to do. So it tells us, grab these amino acids, put it into this order, fold it, and make a protein, which is what's going to cause our trait. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah. So that is how we get our physical traits, and that's how there's that linkage between DNA and traits. All right, can I move on? Yes.